It's back to school time, which means parents are busy making sure their kids' vaccines are up to date. But what about the rest of us? Turns out that we may be due for some shots as well. We got Dr. Matt Delfino in here, the medical director for AFC Urgent Care with Bon Secours, to talk about adult vaccines. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
You know, for certain ages, it's like, all right, before you can go to preschool, you got to make sure this is done. It's 7th grade or 6th grade. I can't remember what you had to have, like, you know, certain ones too. So some of the adults are like, oh, yeah, I guess I do need to catch up. What are the ones that we really need to make sure we're on top of?
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad we're having this conversation. Vaccines are a really important way to prevent illness. And so there's some vaccines that pretty much everybody 6 months and older needs to think about. COVID and flu vaccine, that's something we're all familiar with. But the reason why we're having this conversation is probably the Tdap vaccine, tetanus. It's a school readiness vaccine, but it's also something that all adults need to think about at least once every 10 years, or for women who may be pregnant, every pregnancy, or if you're injured and have an open wound during your treatment for that, you want to consider it to prevent illness. There's also other vaccines that pretty much all adults want to think about: measles, mumps, and rubella. That's a childhood vaccine, but if you haven't had that or don't have evidence of it, you want to consider it. And also varicella, which is a chickenpox vaccine. And then it's important to think about other vaccines depending on your age or different health status, like the shingles vaccine.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
I hear that's just miserable.
It's a really painful rash, and of course it can lead to other uncomfortable complications, so it's definitely important over 50 to think about that. And then you have to think about things like pneumonia vaccines to prevent infections in your lungs. HPV, the human papilloma virus that prevents warts and certain types of cancer, and finally hepatitis vaccines to protect your liver from illness as well.
All right, this seems like a huge list. What if I'm like, oh gosh, I can't remember all these? When you go in for like your, you know, and hopefully guys, you're doing a yearly well check with, you know, with the provider, do they kind of tell you and kind of help monitor, or is this something we just got to kind of remember and follow up on?
No, absolutely. I think it's important to involve your primary care provider in any kind of discussion about your overall health. Certainly they know your other conditions and things that you may be at risk for and can help advise you. Also, an urgent care provider is there if your primary care provider is not available for whatever reason. Of course, that's why we're open 8 to 8 Monday through Friday and 8 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday. So your healthcare provider can absolutely help guide you through this decision-making process.
And what if you've, you know, moved around and, you know, you're not, maybe your parents aren't alive, so you can't call and be like, hey, did I have that chickenpox vaccine? How do you know what you've had? And then what if you did have it? Do you get another one if you didn't remember? Is that bad? How does that work?
Right, this comes up a lot. There's a couple things you can do. You can reach out to your past healthcare providers, see if they can produce a record for you. You can ask your current healthcare provider to look up in the state database if you're vaccinated here in South Carolina, or you can contact your local health department, see if they have a record. But if all that fails and you don't have evidence, you're unsure, then it doesn't hurt to receive another vaccine. In fact, it may help boost your immune system and help it to recognize these germs if you were to come in contact with them in the environment.
And you know, some people are just, they're scared of shots. You know what I mean? It's so funny to see some of the big burly men that, you know, will throw 500 pounds of weight around, but it's like, wait, you want to stick a little thing into my arm? Is it going to hurt? So what do you tell people that are like, oh, I'm worried about that?
No, it is true. It's brief. It's a momentary thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and compared to what these illnesses can cause in yourself, your family members, people you love and care about, it's a really small price to pay.
Is there anything that you should, like, you know, space out? Like, let's say I'm going to go get the flu vaccine, which, when should people start to do it? I always feel like every time I think about it, it's already December, and I'm like, oh no, is that too late to do it? Or?
Yeah, typically the flu vaccine will come in around October, and you want to be thinking about getting it there in the fall so that you have protection through the winter and early spring when flu is at its peak. And then some vaccines are okay to give together because your immune system can deal with them. And some vaccines you want to separate and give time in between doses so that your immune system has a great response. Again, that's a conversation to have with your primary care provider. Also, the CDC is a great resource for vaccine information, and so if you were interested in reading on your own, you could look it up there.
To look it up.
Yeah.
And then is it, true if you're getting, like the flu shot? I always remember being like, I'm so scared to get it. What if I get the flu? Do you hear that a lot?
Sometimes you hear that, although it's a little bit more of bad luck or a coincidence, because the flu vaccine, really none of these vaccines can give you the illness. They're designed to boost your immune system, to help it recognize the germ in the environment, but they're not actually the live germ. So it probably will protect you from being as severely ill, but it won't give you the actual illness if you were to get it, even though you got the vaccine.
If you do it. And last but not least, people are like, okay, good. This is such a great reminder. Thank you, Bon Secours, for reminding us about vaccines. Do we come into urgent care to get a vaccine, or just to your normal provider? Where can we go?
Sure. Like I said earlier, I think it's important to involve your primary care provider and to reach out to them first if you're thinking about updating vaccines, or if you're traveling and thinking about that. But if your primary care provider is not available for whatever reason, or you don't have a primary care provider, urgent care can absolutely fill in the gap. Come on in, we'd be happy to talk to you about what you may need. One thing I do recommend is, if you're going in for something specific, either your primary care or urgent care, call ahead, because at this time of year, vaccines go quick, and you want to make sure they have what you'll need.
They get it. Very great conversation. Thank you, Doc.
Definitely.
We appreciate it.